Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. I just want to know, how much more are we going to have to suffer with this guy in the United States flooding our media?
Good evening, everyone, and hello, New York. Obviously, I was deeply honoured when Bob asked me to debut my stand-up act with you all tonight. I was so relieved to be invited back, but then I started to question whether his invite for me to actually do stand-up was in fact his idea of a joke. Either way, due to the shockingly low representation of gingers last year, and out of respect for my fellow endangered species, here I am, reporting for duty.
Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. This morning, I wake up to my news feed being flooded with all these articles about Harry's pop-up cameo video for last night's charity stand-up comedy event for U.S. veterans. I don't know why the United States keeps indulging in giving this guy opportunities to represent veterans. Seriously, this man has zero respect, in my opinion, with the veteran community. And for him to be doing this and popping up as if his words of encouragement mean anything is laughable. Remember, this is a guy who called our First Amendment bonkers and has been trying to undermine our Constitution with pushing regulation and policy for censorship. Why is anyone in the veteran and military community entertaining him? This is a slap to the veterans and the people who served in their faces, because these freedoms that they fought so hard for and sacrificed themselves is the very same freedoms that this guy is trying to sabotage and take down. Shame on the organization for booking this guy to do this half-ass cameo appearance with his 4 dinky little medals to roll off the same empty speeches that he gives about supporting veterans. Nobody's buying it. Also, how pathetic is this guy to strategically plan dropping this video to the media so it floods everywhere to overshadow his father's first opening of Parliament since his mom passed away. The only good thing about Harry flooding the media is finding out about King Charles's first opening of Parliament since he became king. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known about it here in the United States because no one's talking about it. And when I look at the Google search and type in royal family or type in King Charles opening of Parliament, you can see that it's not very focused on the actual event. It does divert off into Harry and Meghan again. And also you have non-traditional news outlets reporting on it. At least last one I did Google it. To me, that I find shocking. In case you missed it, we're now going to take a look at King Charles's first opening of Parliament since he became king. Now, what we're seeing here is called the procession to the Palace of Westminster. And the monarch usually travels to the Palace of Westminster in the horse-drawn Irish state coach, escorted by members of the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment. So apparently the sovereign's procession, led by a 100-strong guard of honor from the Foot Guards, is accompanied by military bands. So what's so important about this today? Well, not only is it the king's first state opening, but it marks the beginning of a parliamentary session and is the only routine occasion on which the 3 constituent parts of Parliament, Commons, Lords, and the Crown gather together in the same place. As you can see, there's the Princess Royal. I'm assuming Prince Edward also went, but I'm not sure. So now you're seeing a sped-up version of King Charles on his way to Parliament. So, according to parliament.uk, this is how I understand the ceremony to work. So, we have the arrival of the sovereign, and the arrival of the sovereign is greeted by a 41 gun salute fired by the King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery in Green Park. The Royal Standard also replaces the Union flag above Victoria Tower. His Majesty the King and other senior members of the royal family arrives at the sovereign's entrance, where they are received by the Lord Great Chamberlain and the Earl Marshal and conducted to the robing room. Those in the leading part of the procession proceed from the sovereign's staircase to the royal gallery. Those in the rear part of the procession assemble and halt at the entrance to the royal gallery. From there, the cap of maintenance and the sword of state are handed to the peers appointed to carry them. Meanwhile, inside the robing room, the king is dressed in the robe of state, which includes an 18-foot-long crimson velvet cape lined with ermine and trimmed with gold lace. The imperial state crown is also placed on the monarch's head. This is encrusted with nearly 3,000 precious stones and weighs 1.3 kilograms, which would equate to almost 3 pounds sitting on the head. Okay, so what we see here is the sovereign's throne used at state openings and is the only true throne of the sovereign. It features gilded and elaborately carved woodwork, and the throne is inset with rock crystals and upholstered in sumptuous, as they say, red velvet and intricate embroidery. Alrighty, good to know. So next, on the day of the state opening, the House of Commons meets for prayers in the usual way, normally 10 minutes before the sovereign is expected to arrive in the House of Lords. And as a side note, what you're seeing that guy carry is called the ceremonial mace. And what that does is the symbol of royal authority, and without it, neither house can meet or pass laws. As you can see, Rishi Sunak is up close in front. So what we have here is called the procession to the Lord's chamber. Have heralds and pursuivants lead the order of procession, followed by the Lady Usher of the Black Rod, sergeants at arms, Garter King of Arms, the Lord President of the Council, the Lord Speaker, the Lord High Chancellor, the Earl Marshal, and those appointed to carry the sword of state and cap of maintenance. The Lord Great Chamberlain carries the imperial state crown. Next comes the king, accompanied by the queen. Then pages of honor carrying the train of the monarch's robe, other members of the royal family in attendance, and queen's companions. The king, he's supposed to be holding the queen's hand, but for whatever reason, he's not today. Next, the commons are summoned, and after receiving the king's command via the Lord Great Chamberlain, Blackrod walks from central lobby and down the commons corridor to the members' lobby, preceded by the superintendent of custodians and a lord's doorkeeper.
My lords, pray be seated.
The police keep a gangway clear for him or her through the central lobby, and the assistant sergeant at arms in the commons doorkeepers and police form a gangway through the members' lobby. As Blackrod enters the members' lobby, doorkeepers close the western half of the door of the commons chamber and turn the bolt of the eastern half ready for the sergeant at the arms of the House of Commons to slam it. As Blackrod crosses the lobby, the door is slammed in his face. He then knocks 3 times on the door, after which the sergeant at arms looks through a grill in the door, which is then opened.
Blackrod!
Having been announced, Blackrod bows at the bar and then advances to the table of the House and says, "Mr. Speaker, the King commands this honorable House to attend His Majesty immediately in the House of Peers."
Mr. Speaker, the King commands this honourable House to attend His Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Now, at this point, the sergeant at arms collects the Commons mace, and Blackrod returns to the Lord's chamber, followed by the Speaker of the Commons, the Clerk of the House, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and other members. The Speaker's secretary and chaplain also fall in behind the Speaker as they enter the members' lobby. As you can see here, MPs process in pairs from the Commons through central lobby to the bar of the House of Lords. The clerk, the sergeant at arms, the speaker, and Blackrod bow once only at the bar of the House on arriving and leaving, and the speaker's secretary and the chaplain immediately behind them also bow only once. So now for the King's speech. MPs have assembled. The Lord Chancellor takes the gracious speech, which is written by the government, from the purse and on bended knee hands it to the King. So some things to note before we listen to this. Apparently since 1841, this speech has been accepted as a statement of ministerial policy for which the sovereign accepts no personal responsibility. This speech traditionally announces forthcoming state visits and other planned visits from foreign heads of state before setting out the government's legislative program for the session. Let's take a listen.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, it is mindful of the legacy of service and devotion to this country set by my beloved mother, the late Queen, that I deliver this, the first King's speech in over 70 years. The impact of COVID and the war in Ukraine have created significant long-term challenges for the United Kingdom. That is why my government's priority is to make the difficult but necessary long-term decisions to change this country for the better. My minister's focus is on increasing economic growth and safeguarding the health and security of the British people for generations to come. My government will continue to take action to bring down inflation, to ease the cost of living for families, and help businesses fund new jobs and investment. My ministers will support the Bank of England to return inflation to target by taking responsible decisions on spending and borrowing. These decisions will help household finances, reduce public sector debt, and safeguard the financial security of the country. Legislation will be introduced to strengthen the United Kingdom's energy security and reduce reliance on volatile international energy markets and hostile foreign regimes. This bill will support the future licensing of new oil and gas fields, helping the country to transition to net zero by 2050 without adding undue burdens on households. Alongside this, my ministers will seek to attract record levels of investment in renewable energy sources and reform grid connections, building on the United Kingdom's track record of decarbonising faster than other G7 economies. My government will invest in Network North to deliver faster and more reliable journeys between and within the cities and towns of the North and Midlands, prioritising improving the journeys that people make most often. My ministers will strengthen education for the long term. Steps will be taken to ensure young people have the knowledge and skills to succeed through the introduction of the Advanced British Standard that will bring technical and academic routes into a single qualification. Proposals will be implemented to reduce the number of young people studying poor quality university degrees and increase the number undertaking high quality apprenticeships. My ministers will take steps to make the economy more competitive, taking advantage of freedoms afforded by the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union. A bill will be brought forward to promote trade and investment with economies in the fastest growing region in the world. My ministers will continue to negotiate trade agreements with dynamic economies, delivering jobs and growth in the United Kingdom. My ministers will introduce new legal frameworks to support the safe commercial development of emerging industries, such as self-driving vehicles, introduce new competition rules for digital markets, and encourage innovation in technologies such as machine learning. Legislation will be brought forward to support the creative industries and protect public interest journalism. Proposals will be published to reform welfare and support more people into work. My government will promote the integrity of the Union and strengthen the social fabric of the United Kingdom. Working with NHS England, my government will deliver its plans to cut waiting lists and transform the long-term workforce of the National Health Service. This will include delivering on the NHS Workforce Plan, the first long-term plan to train the doctors and nurses the country needs, and minimum service levels to prevent strikes from undermining patient safety. Record levels of investment are expanding and transforming mental health services to ensure more people can access the support they need. My government will introduce legislation to create a smoke-free generation by restricting the sale of tobacco so that children currently aged 14 or younger can never be sold cigarettes, and restricting the sale and marketing of e-cigarettes to children. My ministers will bring forward a bill to reform the housing market by making it cheaper and easier for leaseholders to purchase their freehold and tackling the exploitation of millions of homeowners through punitive service charges. Renters will benefit from stronger security of tenure and better value, while landlords will benefit from reforms to provide certainty that they can regain their properties when needed. My government will deliver a long-term plan to regenerate towns and put local people in control of their future. Legislation will be brought forward to safeguard the future of football clubs for the benefit of communities and fans. A bill will be introduced to deal with the scourge of unlicensed pedicabs in London. My government is committed to tackling anti-Semitism and ensuring that the Holocaust is never forgotten. A bill will progress the construction of a National Holocaust Memorial and Learning Centre in Victoria Tower Gardens. My government will act to keep communities safe from crime, antisocial behaviour, terrorism and illegal migration. A bill will be brought forward to ensure tougher sentences for the most serious offenders and increase the confidence of victims. My ministers will introduce legislation to empower police forces and the criminal justice system to prevent new or complex crimes, such as digital-enabled crime and child sexual abuse, including grooming. At a time when threats to national security are changing rapidly due to new technology, my ministers will give the security and intelligence services the powers they need and will strengthen independent judicial oversight. Legislation will be introduced to protect public premises from terrorism in light of the Manchester Arena attack. My government will deliver on the Illegal Migration Act passed earlier this year and on international agreements to stop dangerous and illegal channel crossings and ensure it is the government, not criminal gangs, who decides who comes to this country. My government will continue to champion security around the world, to invest in our gallant armed forces, and to support veterans to whom so much is owed. My ministers will work closely with international partners to support Ukraine, strengthen NATO, and address the most pressing security challenges. This includes the consequences of the barbaric acts of terrorism against the people of Israel, facilitating humanitarian support into Gaza, and supporting the cause of peace and stability in the Middle East. My government will continue to lead action on tackling climate change and biodiversity loss, support developing countries with their energy transition, and hold other countries to their environmental commitments. The United Kingdom will continue to lead international discussions to ensure that artificial intelligence is developed safely. My government will host the Global Investment Summit, the European Political Community, and the Energy Conference, leading global conversations on the United Kingdom's most pressing challenges. I look forward to welcoming His Excellency the President of the Republic of Korea and Mrs. Kim Keon-hee for a state visit later this month. My government will, in all respects, seek to make long-term decisions in the interests of future generations. My ministers will address inflation and the drivers of low growth over demands for greater spending or borrowing. My ministers will put the security of communities and the nation ahead of the rights of those who endanger it. By taking these long-term decisions, my government will change this country and build a better future. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your counsels.
Now, upon finishing the speech, the king hands it back to the Lord Chancellor, and then with the same procession with the monarch entered, he leaves the chamber. The MPs return to their chamber with the Speaker's chaplain following the clerk of the House and the Speaker's secretary in the procession. In parallel of the MPs returning to their chamber, we have the departure of the sovereign, in which the procession returns through the royal gallery in the same order as before as His Majesty proceeds to the robing room. Upon leaving the robing room, the King and Queen are conducted to the state carriage or state car by the Lord Great Chamberlain, preceded by the officers of arms. The Earl Marshal and the officers of arms proceed to the sovereign's entrance. The king and other members of the royal family leave via the sovereign's entrance as the Honorable Artillery Company fires the first round of a 41-gun salute from the Tower of London. The crown, the cap of maintenance, and the sword of state are then carried under escort to the sovereign's entrance. The gentlemen at arms, having handed in their axes, proceed to the sovereign's entrance, followed by the yeomen of the guard. The household cavalry close and dismiss. Meanwhile, the MPs go back to Commons and they debate the King's speech. So I'm going to go ahead and stop right there. I'm not going to get into critiquing this speech, as I do recognize this is a reflection of the UK government and not that of King Charles, although I personally believe that there is soft influence behind the scenes, particularly around the environment. This part caught me off guard.
My government will continue to lead action on tackling climate change and biodiversity loss, support developing countries with their energy transition, and hold other countries to their environmental commitments.
So what countries is he talking about? Is he talking about the Commonwealth and the countries that are still under the British monarchy? Or is he talking about countries like the United States and the European Union and all those that are participating in the UN power grab that we see going on at this moment with the WEF? I'm just curious. There were a few other things that made my eyebrows raise, especially around technology and surveillance. So I will be closely watching the UK on how they enforce and use this new online safety bill that they just passed into law. So I'll be watching this space closely, especially since Meghan and Harry have involvement with a lot of this online censorship and influence here in the United States with some of the very same organizations who had pushed for this online safety bill. So anyhow, what do you guys think? Did you think that this was a good speech? Leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I will talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a fraud.